I've never told anyone the full version of this. Not like this. There's the story I told my brother. A different one for my ex. And then there's this, the real one. It happened in the fall of 2023. I was 33, recently laid off from a contract IT job, and spending more time than I should have at my late father's cabin up in northern Ontario. About 2 hours from Sudbury. Closest thing to neighbors were a retired couple about a kilometer down the gravel road. That's how I liked it. The plan was to go off-grid for a few weeks. I brought food, books, and my old shortwave radio. No cell signal, no distractions. Just trees, stars, and silence. That first week was uneventful. I read. I slept. I listened to the wind through the pines. But on the 8th night, something changed. It started with the static. I was flipping through the radio bands around midnight, just scanning for faint signals like I used to do as a kid. It was mostly dead air. But then, suddenly, I landed on something unusual, a faint hiss, modulating strangely. It didn't sound like interference. It sounded deliberate. There were pauses. Rhythmic ones. And under the hiss, I swear I heard something like a whisper. Not words I could make out, more like someone trying to speak underwater. I recorded a clip on my phone out of habit, even though I couldn't get a signal. The clip was just static when I played it back. Nothing unusual. But live, when I listened through the headphones, it felt like something was talking back. I turned it off. Shook it off. Went to bed. But the moment I lay down, I noticed something else. There was no sound. Not even wind. Not even bugs. The entire forest had gone silent. I woke up around 3 a.m. to a faint vibration. Not a sound, more like a low hum in my bones. The cabin windows were dark, but something didn't feel right. You know when your body knows something before your brain catches up? It was like that. I went outside with a flashlight. The air had this weird thickness to it, like just before a thunderstorm. But there were no clouds. In fact, the stars were clearer than I'd ever seen them, like someone had polished the sky. It was beautiful, actually. Distractingly beautiful. But then I noticed a light. It was behind the tree line, maybe a few hundred meters out. Not flickering like a fire. Not sweeping like a car. It was just there. A white-blue glow, pulsing faintly, almost like breathing. I turned off the flashlight. The light didn't go away. I crouched low and watched it for a few minutes, trying to convince myself it was someone camping nearby. But nobody camps out here this time of year. And even if they did, what the hell kind of light pulses like that? I should have stayed put. Should have gone back inside. Instead, I grabbed my jacket and walked toward it. The forest was dead silent as I moved through it, no wind, no owls, not even the crunch of leaves underfoot. I realized I wasn't making any sound. Not even my breathing. It was like I'd stepped into a vacuum. Then I heard it again, the whisper. Not in my ears, but in my head. It wasn't saying words. It was more like an idea trying to become language. The closest I can describe it is curiosity. Like something was studying me as much as I was studying it. I stopped maybe 20 meters from the light. Trees blocked most of it, but I could see it clearly through a break in the branches. It was hovering about 6 feet off the ground, maybe the size of a small car, and completely silent. No structure. No edges. Just a soft, perfect sphere of shifting white-blue glow. Then it moved. Not like flying. It just sort of jumped, a meter to the left, then again, but with no motion in between. Like a blinking cursor. And that's when it saw me. The light pulsed sharply, and for the first time I felt fear, not mine, but its. Or maybe its version of fear. Like I wasn't supposed to be that close. Like I had broken something by noticing it. I stumbled backward and fell. And in that exact instant, everything came rushing back. The sound of the forest, the wind, the distant barking of some animal. The spell was broken. When I looked again, the light was gone. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I sat at the kitchen table until the sky started turning gray, just replaying it in my mind. I even sketched the light in my notebook, poorly. I don't know why I did that. Maybe to prove to myself it had happened. Maybe to anchor it in reality before it drifted away. By morning, I started convincing myself I'd imagined the whole thing. Sleep deprivation, isolation, leftover grief, hell, even mold in the walls. There were logical explanations. I wanted one badly. But then I noticed something. My watch was wrong. It said 9:12 a.m., but the sun was already high, too high for that time of morning. I checked my phone, 10:47. The old wall clock matched the phone. Only my watch was behind, by 95 minutes. I hadn't reset it. I hadn't touched it. Something had. Over the next few days, things got weird. Not terrifying. Not yet. Just off. Like the world was slightly out of tune. The radio kept picking up the same strange static at night, only now the rhythm was different. It felt more intentional. The pattern would repeat exactly, like a code, then pause. Then repeat again. I recorded it multiple times. Always the same. I started hearing other things too. Faint knocking in the walls. A sharp click just outside the window at 3:17 a.m. every night, like clockwork. And then the dreams started. Not dreams, exactly. More like memories I didn't recognize. One night I was walking through a corridor made of black stone, with walls that shimmered like liquid. The next, I was floating above a planet I'd never seen before. It was covered in ice and webbed with glowing lines. I remember thinking, in the dream, this isn't Earth. But somehow I knew it. And in each dream, there were figures. Tall. Thin. Indistinct. Watching me from a distance. Never moving. Just there. And every time I woke up, I'd forget the details within seconds, but the feeling would linger. Not fear. Not confusion. Recognition. Like I'd been there before. Then, on the fifth night, I found something new. There were footprints outside the cabin. But they weren't mine. They were bare, no boots. No shoes. And far too long. At least 15 inches, maybe more. But thin. Almost delicate. No claw marks. No tread. Just 5 long toes and a perfect arch in the fresh snow-dusted mud. They led from the edge of the tree leaned straight to the side of the cabin. And then they stopped. No return trail. No wandering. Just a single approach. I stood out there in the cold for a long time, staring down at them. I even reached out and touched one, just to feel the depression in the earth. It was real. The print was real. But no one, nothing, had knocked. Or opened the door. Or left. At least, not in a way I could understand. I tried leaving the next morning. I packed my bag, locked up the cabin, and started driving down the dirt road toward the highway. I didn't tell myself I was running, just getting some fresh air in town. Maybe a motel room. A hot shower. Just a night or two away. I didn't make it 5 kilometers. The GPS froze. I don't mean it lost signal, I mean it locked up, mid-frame. No sound. No recalculation. The display just stuck on a straight stretch of road, even as I drove past it. And then the radio cut out. The engine kept running, but every single electronic system flatlined. Even my watch started ticking slower. I know that sounds impossible, but I could see the seconds crawling. And then the light came back. Up ahead. Just off the road. Same soft glow. Same pulse. I slammed the brakes so hard I skidded on the gravel. It wasn't in the sky this time. It was in the trees, right at ground level. Closer than before. Maybe 50 feet away. I don't know why I got out of the car. I wasn't afraid anymore. That was the terrifying part, I felt nothing. Like a switch had been flipped. Total calm. Like being underwater in a dream. I walked toward the light, again. Just like the first night. Only this time. I didn't get close. It vanished before I reached it. Just blinked out like someone flipped a breaker. And then everything came back. The GPS rebooted. The radio crackled to life. My watch ticked normally. It was like the universe resumed, just like that. I got back in the car and sat there for a long time with the engine running. I didn't go to town. I turned around. And when I got back to the cabin, things were different. At first glance, everything looked the same. But I noticed a few tiny things. My coffee mug was on the other side of the table. My pillow was flipped. The back door, the one I hadn't used, was unlocked. And there was a smell. Not bad. Not moldy. Just wrong. Like ozone and lavender and burning plastic all at once. It lingered in the corners of the cabin, strongest near the windows. That night, I turned on every light. Sat in the middle of the floor with my flashlight and my axe beside me. The radio was silent now. Even the static was gone. And then the whisper returned. Only this time, it said something I understood. It wasn't a voice. Not like you're imagining. It was a thought that wasn't mine. A sentence, clearly formed, landing in the center of my brain. It knows where you are. I don't remember going to sleep. But I remember waking up at exactly 3:17 a.m. I was outside. Standing barefoot in the snow behind the cabin. Staring at the woods. The footprints were back. Only this time, they started at the door, and ended where I stood. The snow on my feet didn't hurt. That's what I remember most. It should have hurt. I was barefoot, standing in a half-inch of powder, breath fogging the air. But I felt nothing. No cold. No fear. Just a kind of buzzing awareness, like I was inside someone else's dream. When I came fully to, I was already halfway back inside. The door was still open, wide enough for the wind to carry in pine needles. I closed it quietly, trying not to think about how long I'd been standing out there. I didn't look back. That morning, I found something new. On the far wall of the cabin, above the workbench where my dad used to sharpen knives, there was a map. Not pinned up. Not stuck with tape. Just there. Like it had always been there. Folded, worn at the edges, showing the area around the cabin with hand-drawn notations in red ink. The kind of map hikers use, detailed contour lines, creeks, elevation markers. But none of it looked right. The river was shaped wrong. The backlogging road was labeled in a language I didn't recognize, jagged, spindly letters like tangled branches. And there were markings on it. Circular ones. 11 of them. All in red. One of them was exactly where my cabin stood. Another was where I'd seen the light near the road. The rest were scattered miles outward, some deep in the woods, others near lakes or ridges I didn't recognize. I blinked. Stepped back. Took a picture with my phone. Then I left the cabin and went out to get fresh air. When I came back in, the map was gone. So was the photo. Just a black rectangle where the image should have been. Every other picture on my phone was still there. Except that one. I didn't say anything aloud, but in my head, I asked the only question that mattered. What do you want from me? And that's when the floor shifted. Not literally, not like the cabin moved. But something inside me tilted. Like a compass needle swinging wildly before locking into place. It was sudden, nauseating. My ears popped. My nose started to bleed. And for a second, I could see it. Not the light. Not the craft. The thing behind it. A shape in the static. A geometry that didn't belong in this world. Like something that wasn't meant to be seen directly. It wasn't an image, it was an understanding. Like I'd glimpsed a page from a book I couldn't read but instantly knew was meant for me. And in that moment, a phrase entered my mind, not in English, but perfectly translated. This is not the first time you've asked. I fell. I don't know how long I was on the floor. When I came to, the map was back. Folded, tucked into my notebook. And written in red ink across the bottom, in my own handwriting. Stop looking. I didn't leave the cabin for the next 3 days. I couldn't. Every time I tried to pack up and go, something stopped me. Not physically, my legs worked fine. But my mind wouldn't let me do it. I'd find myself walking in circles, rechecking the locks, forgetting where I'd put my keys. At one point, I opened the front door, stepped outside, and found myself back inside without remembering how. It was like the cabin had become a loop. A trap. And I wasn't alone in it. Not entirely. On the third day, I found the journal. It was buried beneath a loose board under the sink. A plain, beat-up notebook. Spiral-bound. No name. The cover was smeared with something reddish-brown I didn't want to identify. Inside were dozens of entries. None dated. Just hastily scribbled notes, drawings, fragmented thoughts. Some in English. Others in that same unfamiliar spindly script from the map. But some of it was exactly what I'd been experiencing. Saw the light again. Watched me from the tree line. Time won't hold still. Minutes stretch like wire. I can't remember what's mine and what's been given to me. They don't move like us. They unwrap themselves. And then this. Don't listen when they pretend to be your voice. I read that line 10 times. It made something twist in my gut. Because the night before, I'd heard myself speak. While I was asleep. Clear as day, from the other room. My own voice, whispering. You're ready now. I thought I was dreaming. But when I checked the audio recorder I'd set up by the window, it had picked it up. A faint whisper. My voice. And I hadn't moved from bed all night. There were more names in the journal. Not signatures, just mentions. First names, initials, sometimes just descriptions. Greg from Mississauga. Said he'd seen the same lights in '89. The couple near Redstone Lake. Disappeared. Nobody looked. Forest ranger who kept hearing music underground. Woman with the white eyes. Said she dreamed of them since she was 5. And in the margin, underlined 3 times. We are not the first. We are not even the 10th. That night, the lights came again. But not just 1. 3. All pulsing in the trees, spaced evenly like sentinels. No movement. No sound. Just watching. I didn't go outside. I didn't move at all. I turned off every light in the cabin and sat in the dark with the axe across my lap, shaking. Not because I was afraid of what they were. But because I was starting to wonder if I was one of them now. I didn't sleep after the night of the 3 lights. Not because I couldn't, because I didn't want to. The dreams were getting worse. Longer. More vivid. And less like dreams. They didn't feel like dreams anymore. They felt like recordings. Memories. Someone else's, or mine, but from somewhere else. In one of them, I stood in a vast black hall with no ceiling. There were walls that shimmered like skin stretched over glass. A low droning sound, like distant machinery. I was barefoot. The air buzzed with static, and ahead of me was a doorway shaped like an eye. I remember walking through it. I don't remember what was on the other side. That morning, there was a knock on the cabin door. The kind of knock that's too calm to be human. 4 slow, evenly spaced raps. Not urgent. Not tentative. Just there. I didn't answer. I just stood behind the door, holding the axe, barely breathing. And then I heard a voice. You're almost ready. It wasn't mine this time. It was close, though. A slightly off version. The cadence was wrong. Like a recording of myself played back at 95% speed. A deliberate imitation. I still didn't move. The voice waited. Then said. You've been here before. A long pause. You chose to forget. I don't remember falling asleep, but I must have. Because I woke up to a buzzing sound in my skull, and a feeling I can only describe as being seen from above. Like my consciousness had briefly drifted 10 feet outside of my body and looked down. And when I sat up, something was waiting on the table. A stone. Perfectly round. Smooth as glass. Cool to the touch. It hadn't been there before. I didn't bring it in. Beneath it was a small torn piece of paper, no bigger than my palm, with a phrase written in that same thin, alien script, and underneath it, a line in English. "You may cross when ready." That's when I understood. The lights weren't the phenomenon. They were the invitation. The dreams weren't side effects. They were orientation. And I hadn't been trapped in the cabin. I'd been prepared. That night, the lights appeared again. This time, they were closer. Directly in front of the cabin. 3 points, forming a perfect triangle. I stepped outside. No shoes. No coat. Just the stone in my palm. The forest didn't feel like the forest anymore. The trees shimmered at the edges. Time didn't move forward, it pulsed. I could feel it stretching and contracting, like a muscle. Every sound was distant. The cold didn't touch me. And then, something opened. I didn't see a door. Or a ship. Or a tunnel of light. I just knew something had opened. A space. A breach. A choice. To go forward. To remember. To become something else. I took one step. And the world flickered. I woke up in the cabin. Same couch. Same blanket. Fire burned low in the stove. Everything was where I left it, except I had no memory of lying down. Or lighting the fire. Or how many days had passed. There was no snow outside. The trees were full of leaves. Birdsong drifted in through the cracked window, like it was the middle of June. But the last thing I remembered, it had been February. I checked the calendar on the wall, June 4, 2024. Nearly 4 months. Gone. My phone still showed February. My watch had stopped ticking entirely. My hair was longer. My nails, too. My beard had grown and thick around my jaw. But I remembered nothing. No dreams. No visions. No tunnels of light or alien craft. Just a gap. A clean cut in the reel. Like I'd been edited. I drove to town that afternoon, just to see if anyone would notice. Just to feel the world again. The same cashier still worked at the gas station. The same stray dog lay behind the coffee shop. Nobody stared. Nobody asked where I'd been. Everything moved like nothing had changed. But I knew. I knew I had. It started with the mirrors. My reflection was slightly off. Subtle things, at first. A delay in the blink. A hesitation before movement caught up. Once, I watched myself in the mirror smile just a half second before I actually did. Then there were the thoughts I didn't recognize. Random pieces of information dropped into my mind, coordinates, symbols, fragments of languages I'd never studied but somehow understood. Once I saw a woman in the grocery store drop a can of beans, and before it hit the floor, I knew the exact angle it would bounce, and how many times. I wasn't even surprised when it happened. And then came the visions. Not dreams. Overlays. Flickers of a second world layered over this one, just for a moment. A sidewalk replaced by smooth, colorless stone. A sky filled with perfect geometric constellations. Tall, thin silhouettes watching from a ridge. Once, I reached for a doorknob and, for a split second, my hand had 3 fingers. I looked again, and it was normal. But I'd felt it. I remembered what it was like to use them. I tried to write everything down. But the notebook wouldn't hold it. Not like before. Words rearranged themselves overnight. Sentences vanished. One page even tore itself neatly down the middle, curling like paper burned from the inside out. The journal I found beneath the sink. Gone. The map. Still there, but now it had 12 red circles. One more than before. The newest one. Marked right behind the cabin. There's no dramatic ending here. No final confrontation. No revelation. Just the slow realization that I am not the same, and maybe never was. Whatever I crossed into that night, it followed me back. Or maybe I'm still there, and this is the dream. But one thing I know. They didn't take me to study me. They took me to change me. And they did. There's a sound that comes just before it happens again. A low hum, not mechanical, not electrical. Biological. Like a thought with mass. Like a voice under your skin, vibrating at a frequency your ears can't hear but your bones remember. I hear it now. More often. Sometimes faintly, behind the rustle of trees. Sometimes louder, when I close my eyes too long. And once, just after midnight, it came from inside the cabin walls. I don't sleep much anymore. Not because I'm afraid, but because I might wake up somewhere else again. And every time I do, the world feels slightly less real. Slightly thinner. Colors are too sharp. People speak a half-beat behind their lips. Birds pause mid-flight. Once I saw a deer standing at the tree line, its head tilted like it was listening to the hum too. And when I blinked, it was gone, mid-step, as if someone had edited the frame. There are other people like me. I don't talk to them directly. But I see them. The way they pause at reflective surfaces. The way they flinch at high-pitched frequencies. The way they walk through the world like they've already said goodbye to it. We don't nod. We don't acknowledge. But we recognize. I've started recording myself. Not to document anything. Just to check. For differences in voice, rhythm, micro-expressions. I haven't caught anything obvious yet. But the recordings feel wrong. Like they're too perfect. Like someone smoothed the edges. One night, I found a clip on my recorder I didn't remember making. It was only 7 seconds long. Just me, whispering. Stop trying to return. There is no before anymore. My mouth moved in sync. My voice. But I have no memory of saying it. Sometimes I wonder if that's the real purpose. Not abduction. Not study. But replacement. A gradual overwrite. Not a flash of light, but a slow drift. Like a signal phasing across dimensions until what you were becomes what you are now, and you forget there was ever a difference. There's a new mark on the map. Red. Fresh. Not behind the cabin this time. But inside it. Right where I'm sitting now. If you're hearing this, if you've seen the lights, felt the shift, heard the hum, I want you to remember something. You're not crazy. You're not alone. But you're also not who you were. And if they let you come back, it's because they want to see what you'll do next. End of transmission.